Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage. Today we are in the headquarters, is that the correct term, what you call it? The headquarters of EFI Connection, aka what all other places do you guys own?
So EFI Connection is EFIconnection.com, and we offer a lot of replacement parts, harness-related parts for enthusiasts doing GM fuel injection. So in addition to that, we have a Benchforce product line.
Benchforce, one of my favorite products. You've heard me talk about it a lot. I use it for all of my bitch interface. Tell us more about Benchforce.
So Benchforce has to do with off-board programming, reading and writing ECUs, service programming, even some R&D stuff. I don't think most enthusiasts are going to work with it in that way. There's some creative ways that we've worked with it on the bench for CAN bus module development. But essentially it's a modular system. We have a switch assembly that we call a power block. We have a programming harness that makes a connection to the power block, but we have something like 150 programming harnesses available.
Perfect. And you got a new device coming out from the Benchforce line. We'll talk about it here in a second. Let's talk about the final part of the triumvirate, the trio, whatever you want to call it, LS Wiring.
LSwiring.com. Okay, so LSwiring.com is a focused place for purchasing connector kits. Any possible connector that you're going to see on an LS engine harness is available as a connector kit or a pigtail built to length, 12 inches through, I believe it's 10 feet. You get to choose. And then we assemble that as it's ordered, and we assemble it quickly. We ship it out right away. And we're growing that website so that we're going to have additional products. So there's going to be ECUs available. So we'll offer like service programming for really any Gen 3, Gen 4.
Okay.
Service programming only.
Yeah, just that, stuff like that.
Well, not even that. So
oh, so you're just saying stock.
We're saying, so here's a good example, right? So if somebody pulls a E38 out of an Impala and they want to use it for a truck, well, you're going to have a service program to be able to work with it as a truck application.
Okay.
So we'll offer that level, but as far as any custom stuff goes, there are so many tuners out there. We are a harness manufacturer. We do not just harness manufacturing, but CNC machining and so many other things. Let's let those guys do their thing, and we'll do ours.
Yeah, know your role, stick to it, be the best at it, right? So there will be links to all the websites down below as usual. Don't forget to go and check those out. Check out, and I'm pretty sure from one you can get to everything, right? I was
in some cases, yeah.
I was on EFI Connection the other day, and there was a link to Benchforce's new website on there and stuff like that. But they're fairly intermingled together. So
they are, and there's separate websites for clarity. We had learned with EFI Connection as it grew. When that website grew, it became complicated. So we basically said, look, we do wire harnesses. We also do this off-board programming thing. Let's give it its own presence for clarity so customers don't feel confused when they come to the website.
Excellent. And so give me your quick background of how you got into all of this, because this is a lot of different stuff, all closely related together, but what was the initial spark that created all this?
I fell in love with a 2-port injected engine. And I wanted to put one in my S10 when I was a teenager. So through that process and working with prom tuning and going from the early 165 ECM to the 730 ECM, going from mass air to speed density, I did some prom tuning, and I just kept building different solutions for myself, and I was active with thirdgen.org.
Yeah.
And some of the enthusiasts were asking for some of the stuff I was doing. I started sourcing materials, and then it just turned into a side gig that eventually took over. And I'd say the side gig was from 2002 to 2008. And by that time, it was a second full-time job. Moved the business out of a cold pole barn to a basement to a much larger garage to now a 15,000 square foot facility.
So I would take a guess here that EFI Connection is probably still your primary growth market where you see the most interaction with customers and stuff like that. Am I right in that aspect?
Yeah, so EFI Connection really is known mostly right now for crank and cam signal conversions.
Yeah, and let's get into a little bit more on that, because I used your 24x conversion kit on the GMC Typhoon that I converted over to run on Fuel Tech standalone. And honestly, knew that there was probably a solution out there. And funny enough, I'd already dealt with you guys through Benchforce before that. So I knew about Benchforce before I really knew about EFI Connection, because of what I do. That was more forward facing for me. But then I was like, man, how do I take essentially what is a small block Chevy and convert it to easily run EFI? And that's where I stumbled upon EFI Connection and kind of went down that path. So, but outside of the 24X, kind of what else do you guys do from the EFI Connection front?
Wire harness components, replacement pigtails, things like that. We're not transitioning those into other websites, but we're giving additional, we're offering custom build length by releasing those to lswiring.com. And also you can buy our assemblies through EFIconversions.com. EFIconversions.com is turning into a more enthusiast go-to for if you have a TPI engine and you're looking for replacement harness parts, harnesses, connector kits, LT1, the early LT1s, the 90s LT1s, LS, also Holley EFI, and that stuff is color-coded too. So we were very intentional. For example, if you're going to buy a throttle position pigtail built to length as a GM LS application, you'll get those colors. If you buy this as a replacement for Holley EFI, you're going to get the Holley EFI colors.
Okay, really? You guys do 58X too?
So we do. Yeah, and that was just something that we came up with to bring the Gen 4 electronics to early small block Chevy and big block Chevy and LT1s.
You'd already cracked the 24X formula. Why not go ahead and do 58X?
Well, sure, because if you want to do a 6-speed automatic transmission, for example, your only option was at that time to do E38, E67, something like that, which required a 58 pulse crank and a 4 pulse cam signal.
So
Harness assembly is going to be released on our lswiring.com store soon, and this is a Gen 4 E38 ECM T43 TCM. And what's going to make this different than what you can currently buy from any other manufacturer today is that we're going to allow for CAN bus modules to be added. We're working on the development of CAN bus modules. In this electrical center, this has an ISO 280 footprint, and this space right here will receive a CAN bus module for the AC compressor clutch control. So that's CAN messaging to be able to tell the ECM that AC is on, so it bumps the idle. So in addition to that, this will have a splice saver for distributing the CAN bus. This is what you'll see in production GM vehicles, with the ability to then add on additional CAN bus modules that we're developing: cruise control, starter relay, tap shift, tow haul mode, backup lamps. Most enthusiasts won't bother with much of this at all, but some will want to have features like tap shift. Certainly cruise control, I think that's going to be a popular one. But because we're bringing all these CAN wires down to the splice saver, it's going to be very easy to wire in a cruise control module that will then be able to take signals from a traditional GM cruise control switch, 12 volt on-off signals. And then that will convert that signal to a CAN bus message that communicates with the ECM to control the throttle body for cruise purposes. All right, so we also manufacture in-house. This is 6061 aluminum. This is based on the test fixture idea, but this is an assembly fixture. You can imagine if you're a harness assembler and this is just dangling out there and you're trying to work with this, it's very difficult. So with this fixture, you pop the blank connector in place, you populate it. When you're done, it just comes out real nicely. Everything is detailed on our assembly boards. We have tables that represent cavity for the connector, wire size and color, what cable seal is used, what terminal is used, what hand tool is used when you get to this point where you're doing hand tooling. And even for the assembler's purpose, because GM sometimes uses the same wire color multiple times, it's nice to know what's on the other end. All of our connectors are labeled so that we know where to look. Splices are also labeled and they're called out on our template so we know where every splice is. And behind the scenes, we have a spreadsheet. We use Google Sheets, and we actually spec out what all these splices look like. So the assembler is actively looking at that sheet as they're doing this. All of these connectors, most of them I've drawn in CAD. A few of them, the manufacturers provided some of them. Usually they provide a dumbed down version, so I have to kind of tweak it a little bit to make it look a little more lifelike. But what I even did for the sake of assembly is on any of these, for example, let's look at the crank sensor. You can't mistake what this is when it's in your hand and you're looking to pull from this, and you can't mistake what wire color goes in each cavity. It's very easy for the assembler just to go pop, pop, pop. And in addition to that, if there was any question, you can look at the table to see which cavity receives what wire color. But why bother having them look at the cavity? Because sometimes it's hard to see. They're staring at the connector, So this has really helped us to speed up wire harness assembly. That customers could really just build their own harness themselves by buying. It's backwards, but it makes the most sense for us to say, you figure out what sensors are on your engine.
Right.
You buy that terminated length. We've already done the production tooling. All your devices, your sensors are already terminated with the lengths you need coming back to the PCM
Right.
or EC. At that point, if you want to buy one tool to do your own crimping, that's a whole lot cheaper than buying 10 tools to do the rest of it.
Right.
So you're building it backward, but you get to order up to 10 feet, do whatever you want.
That makes sense from that standpoint, especially because it also opens up some other opportunities if you're doing bulkhead fittings, like mil-spec fittings and things like that, where you can go back, basically find your length there, cut them all. Still, for the most part, would be one crimp on that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it makes sense to go from the sensor back because all of those are individual. And as said, you're going to have all those with links up to 10 foot.
Right.
And so we'll just go with what you just said because that's going to work perfectly fine.
Yeah, and tooling is tricky because to get quality tooling, these generic tools that are $20-$30, they're not designed for anything specific. They're not going to generate the manufacturer's required crimp height and width. Right. And they've got pull-out problems, and you don't even know because you're not cutting it and looking at a cross-section to see what that crimp really looks like. It needs to fold evenly in there.
Right.
And you're going to have airspace. You're going to have one that's like, you're going to have this and call it good, and that's not okay. But the reality of having dies made for these specific applications is they have to be, I believe they do it on a wire EDM. They probably go through heat treat. It's just a tremendous process, which is very expensive.
Right.
So I can't.
The market's not there for it.
It's never going to be there.
Right. What else as far as, let's talk about what you guys do. You're located up here in Erie, Pennsylvania. Is this where you're from originally?
Yes.
Okay, so you're keeping the business local for you. you're doing all this in America. You're machining your own equipment. You have your own mill, CNC, all that stuff. What equipment are you using here to keep all of your stuff in-house?
Okay, so from a harness assembly standpoint, we have a Schloniger cut and strip machine, and it has a PC interface and software, so we can define for any type of harness build what wires, they call those articles. So each article can be a wire size, color, and length, and we can specify on one or both ends if we're stripping. We're stripping the whole thing, or we're just stripping a little piece of it. So once we pull it off of that machine, or the machine spits it out, we organize it someplace. It might go to a template board to be assembled. At that point, we're going to put a cable seal on it if necessary. And then we're going to use wrench die hand tooling to do crimps, and that'll generate, the tooling is specific for every type of terminal. So we have, I believe, 65 wrench die tools at the moment. And if we do a lot of crimping, so when we build a wire harness, an engine harness, we start at the ECU. So we have presses and applicators for that. And that way, the terminals are fed off of a reel, and you step on a foot pedal, and it just goes ka-chink, 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 and just crimps, cuts, feeds, and it just keeps going. And then as fast as the operator can put it into the machine. And there's calibration for all of this stuff. The hand tooling, that's something that we can adjust the crimp height and widths, and then we have to use micrometers to make sure that all of that is within manufacturer spec. The same is true for the applicators, the punch and the anvil. There's adjustments on the applicator itself to adjust the tooling there. In addition to that, when we're building an engine harness, we have assembly fixtures, things that help us to get our job done faster. So we can make an assembly fixture out of 3D printing processes, or sometimes we're using 6061 aluminum, and we're actually designing and manufacturing assembly fixtures using our 5-axis or 3-axis CNC mill.
And that not only simplifies the work of assembling, helps with consistency, things like that. So it's kind of a win-win. You're using essentially one side of the business to support the other side of the business.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I look at the cost of some of this equipment and I say, man, if it was just for this piece alone, like this would not work.
Right.
So, we have a $200,000  5-axis machine, and yes, we use that for making timing covers. It's efficient for making timing covers, especially because the crank sensor hole, we can just rotate the trunnion and the table right up and around to do the crank sensor hole. So that works out really well. But we make use of that equipment in other ways that makes us efficient to do the other work that we do.
Exactly. And let's be honest, you'd have to sell a lot of timing covers to justify a 5-axis machine.
You would.
So.
But I'll tell you what, the other thing is, once we got the 5-axis machine in, really made me start thinking about how can we start doing things differently? What kind of things can we make to help us out? Because we made, for example, the Molex MX123 connectors. Those are the ECU connectors for E38, E67.
Yeah.
Came up with, basically I drew the header that's on the ECU, and it's got those 4 attaching points that stick out, and then the lever comes down and it latches. I drew that in 3D and actually machined out of aluminum those pieces on the 5-axis machine, which on a 3-axis machine would have required so many additional setups.
Right.
I would have said, forget about it. We'll do something different, or we won't even bother with it. But it was just another idea that I had only because we had the equipment in-house to work with.
The ability.
So the last piece I do want to tell you about, though, is continuity test fixtures.
Yeah.
So we're using our 3-axis machine to do the Delrin. So we actually use bar stock of Delrin, which is like a plastic.
Right.
And we cut that to length, and we do all the design in CAD, and we load these sockets with spring test pins to receive completed connectors, and we use that as part of the test process. The bases of those are made out of aluminum. We'll use the 5-axis machine on those. It's much faster. We can do 2 at a time. And because they have to be drilled on the sides, we can actually just rotate the trunnion, drill our hole, rotate the table 180 degrees, drill the other hole, tap the hole, rotate, tap the other hole.
Okay.
So,
And so have you gotten to the point where you have the continuity testers set up for every connection that you guys are working with? Are you working towards that? Is that a goal?
we're very close on currently for most of the work that we do.
Yep.
There's so many connectors.
Right.
And we have to make sure it's right. And the more complicated ones are the ECU.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of trial and error in that as far as getting everything to line up perfectly and relying on, it's said, like the spring connectors that you're using and stuff. So it's repeat use on this device where you can quickly plug something in, unplug it after it checks good and stuff like that. There's a lot that can go wrong whenever you get in that situation.
Certainly is.
So it's impressive. You've been nice enough to show me some of it, and you guys are going to see some of it as part of this video and some other videos that we're going to do. But it's really the next step of what's probably not being done on the enthusiast level wiring that's out there currently. So this is an OE style wire test out process, but outside of, and I'll tell you, Holly doesn't do this on their harnesses because I've gotten almost every single harness from them has been pin drawing. If they were doing this, they would have caught that during a quality assurance. And so even some of the big companies out there are bypassing this because it's time consuming, it's expensive from a manpower standpoint because there's no way, like you guys are developing, to streamline that process and make it, because at some point in time, you have to start taking that time that you're paying somebody to check all these pins and roll that into the price of the harness. It becomes cost prohibitive, and you're trying to figure out a way to provide the best product that is not cost prohibitive, but has that, promise behind it that we checked everything out. And that's the biggest complaint out there anywhere that you talk about.
Yeah,
this
so
stuff.
Mistakes should not happen. You should not receive a product and it not work. And I understand things happen, I get it. But we are trying to minimize mistakes, right? If there was some manufacturer defect in the wire, it passes a continuity test, let's say, and you have handled it, put it through a small hole in your firewall, whatever, something breaks, things happen, right?
Right.
But we want to know that it went out the door with no mistakes. And for the enthusiast, though, if you're reworking or doing your own, you can still do a continuity check with a multimeter.
Right.
From one end to the other. It takes more time. But for us to make these continuity fixtures, it's sort of a necessity because we have to be able to do this relatively quickly because we have to keep the costs down on our side to be able to pass that on for the consumer. And to ring these out by hand, one wire at a time, is not cost.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And the other thing, the stuff that's happening with these China harnesses right now, it drives me crazy because recently I checked and I think it's just under $90. You can buy a brand new LS1 standalone on eBay. Full reveal, our cost of materials, and I'll only tell you we buy at the maximum, the factory pack quantities, and there are no additional discounts for us to get genuine parts. The cost of a China harness is less than our cost of materials. So how do they do that? There are compromises. There have to be compromises to offer a product like that
at that price
point. Testing is compromised.
There's
Material
no
quality.
Let's be honest.
Well, sure.
No testing. Material quality. The wire is not the quality that you want to carry any signals. There's so many things. The connectors are basically glue and dust. Into a form. There is a minimum required standard to be met. You guys are way above that. When I say there's a minimum required standard being met, I'm talking about, as I'll go back to an example, a lot of the stuff that you get with a Holley terminated harness, that is a drop-on harness, specifically for a 6-liter with a 4L80. You're going to run into these issues that you're not going to get whenever you're purchasing for somebody that's reputable, that's their primary business. You know, that's one of the big things that's going to set you guys apart from almost everybody out there is you've got 3 different businesses that are all very closely related together, but aren't so overlapping that they're taking away from one business to the other. So having your conversions isn't going to create quality issues on your harness.
No.
Having your Benchforce devices isn't going to create quality issues on your conversions, things like that. Where you get into companies that have grown too big at this point in time, Holley being the main example, they gobbled up everybody, including AEM recently, which is mind-blowing. You don't have somebody that you can call. I guarantee if you call, if Mike doesn't pick up the phone, somebody that knows what they're talking about does.
Yes.
Whereas opposed, if you call somebody like Holley, the guy that picks up the phone, he will ask you, what are you having problems with? And then he will read you verbatim what's in the manual.
Sure.
I've had that happen 5 or 6 times to the point. So it might cost a little bit extra to get into this level of quality, but the reputation is on the line. The support is going to be there, where if you're having a problem, you're getting somebody that's knowledgeable about the product that you're dealing with, that says, hey, maybe check this out or something along those lines. That makes all the difference in the world, because it's hard enough going to an EFI conversion as a prime example and getting frustrated with it because something isn't working right. And, especially for a lot of the people that are new to this kind of stuff, getting into this conversion, and if something isn't working right, it'll sour you on it before you ever get it done. And working with, EFI Connection and Benchforce and Mike and his group, working with groups like that is going to save you that headache. It's going to save you the heartache. You're going to be able to get a better product when everything's said and done. And time is money. You're going to end up saving time, which then converts over to, well, I spent a little more money maybe to do it right the first time. You'll spend more money doing it twice, I promise you. So why not do it right the first time?
When I consider the cost of any vehicle project, so I have a 89 C1500, and I bought it for $7,000, clean truck. And by the time I did engine conversion, wire harness, some other miscellaneous things, added up receipts, it's closer to $30,000 project, right? I work with other hot rod shops that are building $100,000, $200,000 cars. Why are you going to buy a $100 wire harness and put that in?
All the things that you're going to scrimp on, you're trying to cheap out on, is literally the cardiovascular system of the vehicle, the nervous system. It is the most critical part of a EFI controlled vehicle.
Right.
Why scrimp there?
Look, I've been doing this for a long time, about 20 years. And I just want to say that it takes a team to do all this. So there's a fantastic team that works here. And it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for customers who are willing to invest in the work that we do, who are patient with us when patience is necessary. And I'm genuinely grateful for the opportunity that I have personally, and for the people who are working for me. You don't see behind the scenes the development, even in character and in different types of training, and we do leadership conference annually. I mean, there are so many additional things that help us grow personally and make us into better people that ultimately serve you, the customer. So I just can't say enough how much I appreciate what customers have done for us.
Well, I can't say enough how much I appreciate you letting me come walk through your awesome facility, drag my camera around, bug people who are trying to get these things built and out the door. You know, nobody necessarily wants somebody being nosy and things like that, but you guys, we've been in touch. As I said, you and I have talked multiple times over the year. You guys have supported the channel in the past, and I do appreciate that. I talk about specifically the Benchforce stuff and the harnesses that you had sent me. It made me my job so much easier.
Great.
And so I appreciate your continued support and opening the doors up to the garage so these people can see kind of behind the scenes, because I don't think that it happens enough. We don't have enough exposure specifically on some of these smaller companies that are American companies where everything's American made and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate the opportunity to come in here. So this has been Mike with Benchforce EFI Conversions or Connections. Which one is it?
EFI Connection is the business.
Right.
We do have multiple websites, EFIconnection.com, Benchforce.com. EFI Conversions is turning into a more a go-to for enthusiasts doing anything GM V8, gasoline. So we have an eBay store and Amazon store as well, but EFI Conversions seem to be a good name to represent a more catch-all.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So as I said, there will be links down below to all of these. If you have any questions, what's your email? That's good contact.
Help@EFIconnection.com. We kind of start there and it gets assigned to the right person at that point.
Perfect. And as always, you can hit up the comments down below. If I can answer a question from stuff that I've seen or heard talking from Mike, I will do my best to answer. And if not, I will refer you to help@EFI.com. But for now, I'd like to thank Mike and all of his employees for welcoming us. You guys know the drill. Thanks for stopping by EFI Conversions.com, and ABT, always be tuned.